Okay, here we go. Okay, guys, welcome. I'm Doc G. This is Jimmy DIELE next to me. And we got author Laurie Jacobson with TV dinners and a lot of great books that she wrote. Welcome, Laurie, to the show.
Hey, thanks.
Hey, Laurie, how you doing?
To be here.
Delighted to have you. Let me start like this. Laurie, back in the early 80s, you were a waitress and comedian over at the world-famous Comedy Store in Los Angeles, one of my favorite places. Tell us what type of time that you had working there and tell us about your experience there.
Oh, I look back on that time so fondly. Well, first of all, what compelled me there was that I was in an improv workshop that was run by Harvey Lembeck. Do you remember Harvey? Great character actor. I guess most well known for playing Eric Von Zipper in all the Beach Party movies. He was on Sergeant Bilko and in Stalag 17, and Harv worked a ton. He came out from Brooklyn with Buddy Hackett and Phil Foster and all those guys. And Harvey had a fabulous comedy improv workshop where some of my as yet undiscovered classmates were Robin Williams, John Ritter, John LaRoquette. It was a really wonderful place to be. And of course, immersing myself in the comedy world and being a starving actor, I needed to look for work in a place where I would be inspired. So that was definitely the Comedy Store. I was probably the worst freaking waitress in the joint. Really? 5 drinks and I'm like with the tray, whoa. And Richard Pryor is there every night for like 6 months. So you had to carry a little more than 5 drinks. So, first of all, with Pryor being there, the whole world came in to see him. Every night it was, Mick Jagger and Peter O'Toole and Bette Midler. And I'm just, boing. And that was wonderful. And it was also a fabulous learning experience to see people doing the same routines every night. And, one inflection can kill the joke. One little change. So that was a fantastic education for me. And then the people that were there then that were, pretty much only Jay Leno and Jerry Seinfeld were known. Letterman had just gone to New York to do a show. But otherwise, there were undiscovered people there. Arsenio, Gary Shandling, Michael Keaton.
Wow, untapped talent.
Roseanne, Whoopi Goldberg. Oh my gosh, it was Sam Kinison who he saved Mitzi's. Sam couldn't get arrested in that store, in that place, and until one night he saved Mitzi's life. Mitzi Shore, the mother of Pauly Shore, and the owner of the Comedy Store. He saved Mitzi from being strangled by her cocaine-fueled boyfriend. And,
wow.
And after that, he got the 10 o'clock slot and boom, took off like a rocket.
Amazing. What was Mitzi like to work with?
Well, God rest her soul. Mitzi was this tiny woman who commanded, but she was the queen of comedy, and you had to please her or be gone. And she was extremely nasal, and she talked that if you ever quote Mitzi, you have to talk like Mitzi talked. We would have Mitzi offs all the time to see who did Mitzi better. Mitzi was she was hard to please. I know that she really, really helped the comics a lot. The waitresses, not so much. We got very strict rules, hands off all, comedians, because they
Really?
were for her. Yes, because they were for her.
Oh,
She
wow.
she pretty much had her choice, and she loved champagne and Valium, which so some
There you go.
usually there were pictures of comedians hanging all over the club, and by 1 o'clock at night she was usually having conversations with those pictures, and
Oh my God.
it was interesting. It was very interesting.
Crazy. Now, when Sam Kinison performed there, right? Now, wasn't there some like eerie stuff that went on that sort of you experienced some haunted stuff that happened in the Comedy Store?
That place is so haunted. First of all, it was Ciro's nightclub,
Right.
which was the most glamorous nightclub on the Strip in the 40s and 50s.
Right.
Martin and Lewis made their debut there. Sammy Davis made his debut there. Sinatra, Lena Horne, you name it, they played there. And when a club is as successful as Ciro's was, the mob gets very interested. So Mickey Cohn, who had his storefront down the street, it was supposed to be a men's clothing store. So once a week, he sent a hat box empty to the to Ciro's with a note in it that pretty much said, "Fill this with money and send it back to me," which is what they did. And I think people got roughed up there. I from the kind of ghosts we saw, I really think someone was murdered in the basement there.
Oh my God! Really? Wow.
So we constantly saw guys in pinstripe suits,
Really?
lapels, walking in the offices, and we heard a lot of voices. Like after this all was going on when the club was closed, of course, never when it was open, and there were hundreds of people in there. But closed, you kind of saw everything. Literally, you saw spirits peeking around the corner to see if the room was empty. You heard women in the ladies' room talking about some heel who two-timed me.
Wow.
It was really quite amazing. But in the basement was this dark, black, 6.5, 7 foot tall outline of a man. And the basement just had a grate across it, like a freight elevator.
Right.
And some people saw him at the gate, pushing the gate out into the hall, pushing it feet out into the hall and having it snap back. And they, heard this weird noise, and they just ran. Roseanne witnessed that. And so the people who saw that never wanted to go to the basement. But one afternoon, Mitzi wanted some stuff from the basement, and she sent Blake Clark, another great comic, to the basement. He wouldn't go alone, and this guy was a platoon leader in Vietnam. He was no shrinking violet. He grabbed two friends. They go down there together. They are no sooner down there than one of his friends holds up his hands and starts screaming, "No, no." And Blake couldn't see anything, but he didn't have to because he knew what was down there. His friend said he saw this black smoke rising from a corner. They didn't wait around. His friend said his hands were so hot, he felt like he was holding them against a stove, but they could all see their breath in the room. And Blake grabbed his friends and they're running upstairs. And as they're running, this piece of cardboard falls from out of nowhere. It hits Blake on the hands and it has Blake's name written on it.
Wow.
Wow.
And my theory is when they know your name, run like hell. So let me just, to get back to your question though, the ghosts hated Sam's act. The screaming was so disruptive. You know how he used to yell,
right.
You know, constantly in his act. They hated it, and so whenever he went on, things would have the lights would go out, the sound system would fail. Once he challenged the spirits in an empty room late at night, and ashtrays went flying through the air, crashing against the wall. So yeah, he was the only comic I know to be heckled from beyond.
Wow. So is that what started Hollywood Haunted? The idea for this book?
Yes. Well, I wrote a lot about unsolved murders and mysteries in Hollywood, and there were always ghost stories attached to them. And then the Comedy Store cemented that for me, and I thought, I got to start finding out about this stuff.
Right. Doc, what do you got for
Well, I wanted to ask you, within that question, why do you think they were so mad at Sam Kinison? I mean, was it his language?
No, I think it was just the volume.
So, he's so loud. He was so loud, he was disturbing the peace.
He was disturbing the peace. Wow.
Yes, once he was on in the original room, which is much smaller, and Blake and I were in the main room next door, which was empty that night, and we heard this weird buzzing, throughout the room, and then I left. Blake stayed, and he said the buzzing slowed down, and he figured out they were saying, "It's him. It's him. He's on." They just hated him. It was pretty funny.
We always
laughed.
Let me ask you this question. You're married to Timmy from Lassie. How did you guys meet?
We met at an autograph show. That's how long ago it was, because now they're all Comic Cons. Right. But originally they were called autograph shows, and I was signing my books and he was signing memorabilia, and Chip from My Three Sons introduced us.
Oh, so cool. That's so cool. Are you still friends with Chip, by the way?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, he's one of the nicest people I've ever met, Stanley.
Wow. You know, when you go to the Comedy Store, the thing about the Comedy Store, which is so great, is that you never know who's going to be there. You know, they have people on the list, but big people show up. Like one night I was actually in the Comedy Store, and I was sitting there for a show, and all of a sudden Andrew Dice Clay walked in, and Arsenio and Eddie Murphy, and they all take the stage. But what people don't realize is that the comics who were set to go on, really, they're sort of set back a little bit, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And then try and follow that act,
Exactly. Try to follow those guys.
Yeah. In my time there, that was Robin. Robin was always walking in unexpectedly and would take the stage, for 5 minutes or an hour, you know, and like Carson's scouts would be in the audience that night, and guys that were, you know, and mostly guys, there weren't that many women at the time, you know, they were angry. Robin didn't need to audition for Johnny Carson, but they sure did, you know, so they would miss their chance, and made a lot of people angry.
Right. And when Dice first started there, right, Dice was just a little part of the act, right? And that wasn't his whole act. I mean, now it is, but wasn't that just like a character in his act?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. He was dating Mitzi's daughter, and, you know, he was a sweet guy. We often went out afterward to Ben Frank's down the street for early morning breakfast with Andrew.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that night. I mean, after the show, I mean, they were so cool because they would just hang around. And so after when I walked out into the parking lot, and Andrew Dice Clay was hanging out there by his car, and I just walked up to him and we started talking for a long time because we're both from Brooklyn. And that's just what's so nice about the Comedy Store. I mean, it was just, you never knew who you were going to meet. You never knew who you were going to see. And I just fell in love with that place. So every time I'm in Los Angeles, I always make it a point to go there. Did Johnny Carson ever come in? I know he had the scouts there, but did he ever actually come into the Comedy Store?
I never saw him there.
Yeah.
I don't think so. You know, he wasn't a very social.
Yeah, that's what person. I heard.
Yeah.
It's odd, isn't it? You know, and Letterman was the same way, you know. Some people love to hang out in the back and network and, you know, analyze.
That would be me. Yeah, that's the way I am.
You know, get feedback on your routine and stuff, but no.
So would you say that the people that haunt the Comedy Store is actually those gangsters from Ciro's who actually ran Ciro's? Is that really who's haunting, or is it comedians, former comedians?
We felt that they were an older crowd. There was one comic. Are you familiar with the Steve Lubitkin story at the Comedy Store?
Not really, no.
In the mid to late 70s, Mitzi, the comics, so, you know, Mitzi wasn't paying any of the comics, and she's making a lot of money. Sure. So the comics said they wanted to get paid, even just a honorary fee, but they, you know, they'd love to get $20 a night or something. And she said no, and they picketed the Comedy Store. And they eventually won, and the whole thing was organized by this comic named Steve Lubitkin. And after the picketing was over and comics were getting paid, funny, but Steve Lubitkin wasn't being booked at the Comedy Store anymore. Even though Mitzi said she wasn't holding anything against him, he couldn't get on stage there. And so very tragically, he went to the top of what was then the Continental Hyatt House, which is a very large hotel next door, and he leaped to his death, trying to land in the parking lot of the Comedy Store, but I think he landed in the driveway of the Hyatt. Anyways, yeah, it was pretty awful, and a really sad note in that wonderful place's history. But some people think Lubitkin is hanging around the Comedy Store. Hard to really say. But the people that we saw and the voices that we heard were definitely old-timey.
Wow. What about John Belushi? I know he performed there. Do you have any stories about John Belushi?
Belushi came in 2 nights before he died.
Oh, man.
With, oh no, I'm blanking on his name, and I just love him. He was on Law and Order for a million years. Belzer, Richard Belzer.
Oh, Richard Belzer, sure.
He was best friends with Belzer, and he came in with Belzer, and can I swear?
Yeah, sure.
He looked like shit. I mean, he just, well, he was on a bender, and he definitely looked like he was on a bender. And I was just horrified to see him like that. I mean, I don't even know if he had to be led around, and there were times previous when he was there where he was sober, and he was working so hard to stay sober. And people with drugs just want to be able to say,
Yep.
Belushi's doing my coke tonight, and so they would put things in his pocket. He's saying, no, I'm not interested. I don't want this.
Wow.
He had to have a companion with him to fight these people off. It was really terrible. But when I saw him, he wasn't fighting it. And then, I was, and then 2 days later, he's found dead at the store. At the
Chateau Marmont. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, and Robin was supposed to have been there. De Niro was supposed to have gone, but didn't go. And Belushi was somebody who could do more than anybody else. More drugs, more drinks, more cigarettes, you name it. And so a shockwave, it was like a bomb dropped in the Comedy Store. And that's when that was the start of coffee houses. People stopped going to bars. And I remember Paul Mooney talking to Richard Pryor in the hallway, and Pryor was shaking his head, and Mooney had him up against the wall and saying, man, don't you know that's what they say about you? That's how you're going to end up. And it was so heavy.
Wow. What about Rodney Dangerfield? We got a question here about Rodney.
Yeah, did you know Rodney?
No, I never met him. I heard stories about him, though, but I never met him.
I have to make a comment about Belushi, though, real quick. When he did Animal House, they said that they could not keep him down. He was just like literally all over. He ate all the food, and he was just crazy. So yeah, you're right. When he was let loose, he was like a loose cannon.
Yeah, it was. And what a talent, it was really,
absolutely.
Really sad. And I saw another question that said, did I meet Richard Pryor? Well, of course, it was there every night. And that was one rule Mitzi had. Richard Pryor was God, and we were to treat him as such. And,
man.
And so one night he asked me to get him a drink, and it was literally 2 steps away. And now this is 81, I think. And, I walked back with his drink, and he tried to give me $20, and which was a lot of money in 81. And I said,
it's a lot of money to me.
And he got his drinks on the house. So, I said, it's fine. And he called me Peter Pan. I wore my hair was cut very short. So I said, it's okay, Mr. Pryor, keep your money. And he said, Peter Pan, do you like money? And I said, well, yeah. Do you want to make some money, Peter Pan? Yeah. He said, then take the money. So he was so kind. He really was.
Nice. What about Jay Leno? I know Jay pretty well, but I've heard stories about him living in the parking lot in his car. Did you ever see that or experience that when you were there?
I heard them too.
No, that was before my time.
Oh, okay. So when he was already a star when he up and coming star when he was performing there when you were there, right in the early 80s.
He was really big on the college circuit at that time, okay. And at that time, La Roquette was living in his car on Laurel Canyon in front of my friend's house. But Jay was already living in this really cool English Tudor home that had been a home of Charlie Chaplin's.
Oh, cool.
when he
Nice.
owned the studio on La Brea that is now A&M Records.
Oh, wow.
At least it was last time I was there.
Cool.
And so he was experiencing success.
Yes, he was. Your first book was called Hollywood Heartbreak, right? Tell us about that.
Hollywood Heartbreak is tells the lives and the tragic and mysterious deaths of I've forgotten how many now, 37 Hollywood people who helped to build the industry and whose deaths contributed to its mystique.
Oh, wow.
And that really started me. I wrote that, and I was immediately offered to write a documentary. And the next thing I knew, I was working for Jack Haley Jr., who was a wonderful, legendary producer in Hollywood, son of the Tin Man. And he wrote, produced, and directed That's Entertainment 1 and 2. And so through him, I met everyone in Hollywood I ever wanted to meet, except for Fred Astaire. I never got to meet Fred Astaire. And I saw a question, did I know Red Fox? No, he was from my hometown of St. Louis, and my parents had some albums of his, which were pretty X-rated. They used to see him in St. Louis.
Yeah, he was a little racy. Yeah, he was very, very racy. Yep.
But I never got to meet him either.
Wow. In Hollywood Haunted, you talk about the Ozzie and Harriet Nelson house being haunted. Pretty wild. And Lucie's house.
Yes. Well, the Nelson house, Ozzie led a very clean life, and yet died very young. I think he was just in his 60s from liver cancer. For a guy who never drank, never took drugs, never smoked.
The way it works, yeah.
And so he was pissed off about that. So he was still going to work every day. The studio where they shot Ozzie and Harriet had a lot of experiences with Ozzie being there. And then at home, he was very active. So Harriet lived there for a couple of years after his death, and then she sold it to a couple that had been friends of theirs. And the woman in the couple, every time she laid down for a nap or to go to sleep at night, seems that Ozzie was a little disruptive. She would feel someone pulling the covers back and someone nuzzling at her neck. And, well, let's just say Ozzie had fast hands, baby.
You also talked about the haunted Hollywood hotels. What would you say was the most haunted Hollywood hotel? Is it the Hollywood Roosevelt? I heard stories about that place.
Yeah, that's the one I know the most stories about.
Yeah.
And the others mostly have closed over the years, but the Roosevelt is still going strong. And, at the time I was writing the book, the Roosevelt was undergoing a big makeover. And just like us humans here on Earth, ghosts hate disruption. And they like for the place to remain as it was when they were there, which is sometimes, let's say at the Hollywood Palace, they would see ghosts from the knees up. And after they did some research, they found out that the original floor had been raised.
Oh, wow.
1.5 feet. So the ghosts were still walking on the original floors, but
crazy.
The Roosevelt is very haunted. One of the celebrities that hangs out there is Montgomery Clift.
I heard that.
Yeah, he was living there during From Here to Eternity. And you can still hear him practicing the bugle outside the room he stayed in.
Wow.
And he was not a very happy guy. And he disrupts people that come from all over the world to stay in the room that he stayed in.
What about Marilyn? Wasn't there a story about Marilyn there in the mirror or
Yes,
something
she
like that?
loved to. Yes, she loved to stay there. She's had a regular suite that she stayed in, and she was there so often that she purchased this beautiful antique full-length mirror to hang in her suite. And when she passed away, they removed the mirror and they put it in storage in the basement. And during this makeover, they found it, but they didn't know what it was. It's 25 years later, they find a pretty mirror. So they hung it in the lower lobby. And on the night of the grand opening, a waitress was walking by and she saw the mirror was dirty. So she went over to wipe it and she saw a blonde woman. She turned around. She thought someone had come up behind her. No, she looked again, and there is a blonde woman in the mirror. And it's Marilyn Monroe. And she's fixing her hair and looking at her makeup like she must have checked herself out in that mirror 1,000 times.
Amazing.
And, now I don't think she's haunting the mirror, but your spirit can remain with items. It's why you're never supposed to remove items from Egyptian tombs or Native American burial sites.
Right. Did you ever hear anything about the Highland Gardens Hotel? I had an experience when I was in Hollywood. I checked into the Hollywood Gardens Hotel, and I just when I went in there, it was just a spooky place to begin with. And they gave me a room. And when I checked into the room, the door like slammed, like the whole building shook. Then it was just like very eerie all night long. It was just a very weird place. In fact, I checked out the next morning because I said there's something with this place. And then I found out that was actually the motel actually that where Janis Joplin died. And she was actually right on the same floor as where I was staying, like a few rooms down. So I was like, wow. And I didn't know that till after the fact, after I had moved out of that hotel to another hotel the next day, which was pretty wild. So
yeah, actually, that was the whole start of me doing this. That I was driving to a movie one night and somebody said Janis Joplin died there. And it was only like 3 years before,
Oh, you're kidding.
So I could just, every time I passed it, I thought, I can't believe it. So one day I finally pull over and I went in and I asked, and this is before it was popular to say a celebrity died in our hotel.
Right.
So they denied it, but they said that I could walk around the grounds if I wanted to. And I was walking around and somebody came out of their room, asked me if I needed help. And I sheepishly said, why I was there. And he said, oh, I lived here then. I helped break down the door to her room. Let me take you there and tell you what happened.
Right.
So I accidentally got my first interview that way. And and that's where Janis literally bit the dust.
Yeah, a very spooky place. And I knew nothing about that when I stayed there. And I had to move out the next day. And then I was reading about it a little while later on, and I found that out. And I was amazed. I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. It was actually, when she stayed there, I think it was called the Landmark. And now it's the Highland Gardens Hotel. But what a spooky place. What about Lucille Ball's house? I saw it many times in Beverly Hills. You wrote a story about that. Tell us about that.
My aunt lives in Beverly Hills and Lucy lives right around the corner. So, and that was a landmark for everybody. Jimmy Stewart was right across the street and Jack Benny was right next door and Rosie Clooney was down the block. It was an awesome, awesome block. And so we'd always look at Lucy's house to see if, we could see Desi Jr. or,
right.
something exciting. And So after Lucy passed away, some people bought the house and they decided to tear it down. And a comic named Chuck McCann was driving by, and he had been to Lucy's house many times for parties, and it was half demolished, and you could see into the rooms. You know, part of the wall was missing. You could see the wallpaper, and he was just parked there looking in and remembering the times he had spent there. And then it came to his attention that a lanky redhead was on the perimeter of the property and trying to see over the wall. And he thought, what's going on here? And he looked closely, and it was Lucille Ball.
Crazy.
And, you know, he would never allow me to use his name to tell that story. I can now because he's with Lucy somewhere.
Oh, wow.
He just passed away,
but, he said, I want to continue working in Hollywood. And if you tell people I saw that, they're going to think I'm nuts and I'll never get another job. So
crazy. We recently had Engelbert Humperdinck on the show.
Oh, really?
And I worked for the TV show Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I used to work for Robin Leach back in the day. But we did a story on his house, the Pink Palace, which is right there in Beverly Hills. It was actually Jane Mansfield's house. And Engelbert used to say he used to see her down by the pool out in the backyard now and then hanging out. I asked Engelbert recently about that. I don't know if she was naked, but I asked Engelbert about that recently. He said she was no longer there anymore. I think he actually sold that house. But what a weird story that was. Did you ever hear anything about that?
I didn't. I have not heard about her spirit being anywhere. I did hear, and I wonder if he mentioned it, that he found a panel. Did he talk about this?
No.
He found a loose panel in the house, and it was a door that opened, and all these magazine covers and things of hers were hung up in there.
No, he didn't tell me about that. He just told me about down by the pool. He used to see her, and then I said, you know, last time I talked to him about it, he goes, you know what? But then we didn't see her anymore. So I guess she was there for a time when he was there. But that was all he told me about. He didn't. But that's pretty interesting what you're talking about.
I see a question. Any John Wayne stories? The only John Wayne story that I have is the sad story of his death. I mean, here was this, you know, heavy duty American patriot, and he goes to St. George, Utah, to shoot one of the worst damn movies he ever made, where he played Genghis Khan and was, you know, but he was Genghis Khan talking like John Wayne. But we were testing, the US was testing nuclear weaponry in the desert at that time, and a huge cloud of atomic dust, which they called the cloud Dirty Harry, floated away from the bombing site, and it landed right over St. George, Utah, and at least 90 people that worked on that film died of cancer, and John Wayne was one of them. Susan Hayward, Dick Powell was the director, and to make matters worse, they brought contaminated dirt back from the shoot site, from the location site, to the studio because they wanted the color of the dirt to match. So it was very bad.
That's a huge tragedy that could have been avoided, I guess, if you just, you know, sometimes things are meant to be. I mean, you think about some of these people that, like Elvis Presley, when he passed away. How many times do you hear all the time, I've seen Elvis somewhere, right? Spirits. It hovers around Graceland, or right? I mean, Jimmy, you've talked about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced Elvis's spirit. Actually, I really did. Out of all the places I've been to a lot of places where Elvis grew up in Graceland, but where his spirit is actually around is in Las Vegas at the Hilton Hotel. And even Wayne Newton, who I know really well, actually saw his spirit in the showroom there at the Hilton. And I actually had experiences with Elvis in that Hilton Hotel. That's your next book right there, Laurie.
What? Like
Haunted Vegas. Haunted Vegas. If you need a co-author, I'm right here.
All right. Well, tell me what happened.
Well, when I was there, I went up to visit. It was the very first time I was at the Hilton, I think it was, and I went up to visit the suite up. Elvis used to live up on the 30th floor, and I went up to the 30th floor, and it was just a weird feeling. You get like chills with the ghost type things. You have a lot of those stories. That happened to me. Then when I went down, when I was in the casino, just some other weird stuff happened. And when Wayne was there, Wayne was performing up on stage, and he was looking into the balcony when he was on stage, and he actually saw Elvis in the balcony. He actually saw him up there while he was performing. Yeah, and he actually wrote about it in his book and everything. But pretty wild. And that's the most stories I ever heard about where Elvis is. I've heard stories about Graceland as well, but mostly in Vegas at the Hilton, really.
Interesting. That's really interesting. When millions of people, and I hear the same thing about Maryland, hundreds, thousands of people think they see Maryland too, but the pull of millions of people who wish you were still here, it can be very strong.
Yes.
And it can actually bring spirits around when they don't necessarily want to be here.
Yes. Yeah, and even in Vegas, I mean, there was I've been in the they say the Liberace Museum and the Liberace restaurant that he had.
I love the Liberace Museum.
Yeah, and they say that was very haunted. And I used to go to the restaurant, which was called Coluccio's. I was there all the time, and I never experienced anything. But they said that place had a lot of spirit activity in there. And Red Fox's house in Las Vegas is supposedly the most haunted place in Las Vegas. It's now a real estate. We should have talked about this last week, but it's actually a real estate. But he used to live there, and he used to actually park this truck, the Sanford & Son truck, outside the house. I've heard so many stories about that actual house. They said it's one of the most haunted places in Las Vegas. But there's pretty interesting stuff. But you also had another book. Tell us about Dishing Hollywood real quick.
Okay, I will, but I have to show you that my Liberace magnets are never far from me.
Cool. Oh, wow. Cool. Lee, there he is. And I actually been in his house many times in Vegas. I toured the house, and also I've heard stories about that. But he must like me because nothing ever happened when I was in there. But I don't know. Anyway, Dishing Hollywood. You talk about a lot of great stuff in here. I love the story about Frank Sinatra and Joe DiMaggio in here. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the Wrong Door raid, infamous. DiMaggio and Marilyn were separated. And I have to say they were crazy about each other. Joe could be a little rough and a hot-headed Italian, and she was shooting the 7-Year Itch and the dress blowing up, and rubbed him all the wrong way. And he was sure that she was having an affair. And Sinatra said, we'll catch her. Tonight we'll catch her. And she was at an apartment with another couple where she was having a nice, quiet dinner with some friends. And Sinatra and his boys, all riled up with DiMaggio, go running over to that apartment building and break down the door, and they're sure she's in there, and some poor woman, sound asleep with rollers in her hair, and some granny nightgown, comes running out. What's going on? And and the press got a hold of it, and DiMaggio looked like an idiot. And so he was none too happy with Sinatra, who had fueled the raid.
Wow. Then there's TV Dinners. Tell us about TV Dinners.
TV Dinners is my most recent book. As you mentioned, Doc G, I'm married to Timmy from Lassie, John Provost. And so one thing I am blessed to have in my life is a lot of former kid stars. And, my husband's era, they're very different than today. You know, they didn't make $1 million. They didn't get the high salaries. They don't get residuals. And they're really down to earth, wonderful people who, you know, they stay in touch with their casts. I mean, my husband still talks to June Lockhart. You know, she never forgets a birthday. She was the first person to RSVP to our wedding. And they're all like that. You know, Wally and the Beeve talked to Barbara Billingsley till the day she passed away. Wow. So I thought, well, this is wonderful. What can I do with these folks? And I came up with TV dinners where they recount their time on their best loved show, and they tell me what their favorite dishes were back in the day and today. So you can actually, you know, because it was their era that the TV dinners were actually invented. Swanson's TV dinners, because the 50s, the 60s, suddenly TV took over and people were suddenly having dinner in front of the TV. So we have them to thank for frozen turkey dinner.
Oh, wow. Then you also have Timmy's in the Well. Tell us that. It's about your husband and about his time as Timmy on Lassie and his whole career. Tell us about that.
You know, many of his fans had been asking for the whole story on Lassie. And actually, he started working when he was 2.5 in his first film. And he did about 10 films and several live TV shows that got him the part of Timmy on Lassie. So he was already a seasoned performer by 6 years old. And most people aren't aware of his earlier years. And then the Lassie years, and then what came after, and the sex, drugs, and rock and roll of the 60s, and surviving all of that.
So
to
cool.
The happy place he's in today. So,
oh, so awesome. Love that.
And hundreds of pictures. And it's, you know, the thing I really love about the book is I interviewed more than 100 people for the book, for a lot of his peers. So if you aren't particularly a Lassie fan, but you want to know what it was like to be a working child actor in the 50s and 60s, this is the story, because they're all in there.
Well, he was one of the first real big child stars at that point in time, right? I mean, he was one of the biggest.
Yeah, he was voted most popular child actor of 1956, I think. Yeah, he was. He was a big deal.
So tell us what else you're working on, Laurie, right now.
I'm working on a couple of things. I'm working on a book called Taking the Wheel, and it's 50 iconic Hollywood women and the cars they drove.
Nice.
From the 20s to the 70s. So 50 years, 50 women who were successful enough to command their own vehicles and left their mark in Hollywood. And I'm hoping I have my fingers crossed on that one. I've a couple publishers really interested. So I think that's a go. Okay. And the other book I'm pushing right now with publishers is a little off my beaten path of Hollywood. It is, it's called Top of the Mountain, The Beatles at Shea Stadium.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Now you're from Brooklyn.
I am.
Where are you from?
I'm in New Jersey, so I'm not that far from Brooklyn.
So were you around in 65 in New York when the Beatles played Shea?
Absolutely. I was born in 61, so yes.
Oh, you were just a tot. Well, you couldn't go.
Hell, I was around.
Yeah. Okay. You're right. Well, it was the first rock and roll concert ever in a baseball stadium. Nobody, I mean, not Elvis, not Sinatra, nobody played a stadium. Nobody thought the Beatles could fill it. Most people at that point, they're only a year into their success. Most people still thought they were a passing fad. And this is my favorite part of the story. The promoter who came up with this idea is before internet, clearly, before faxes, when long distance was still your parents saying, "Get off the phone, it costs too much." Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager, said, here's what their guarantee needs to be, and until you pay me half of it, you can't talk about the concert. So the promoter said, how can I raise the money if I can't advertise it? And he said, right, you can't advertise it, but you can talk about it. So every day the promoter went to Washington Square Park and he told teenagers, and he got a P.O. box and said, if you want to go, tickets are $3 and $4 and $5. Wow. And he sold out the stadium 3 times over. He got yen, he got rubles, he got it somehow through a network of teenage girls. Great. That concert information went around the world.
Wow.
Laurie, so, I wanted to ask you, you still do comedy?
I don't do stand-up anymore. No.
But do you still do comedy, like if you were asked to do it, like on the radio, on the internet?
No, not really. I don't do routine comedy. No.
Right. Okay.
No.
So Laurie, getting back to the Beatles, I want to let you know that in the Hard Rock Cafe here in New York City on Broadway, you can actually see the suits that the Beatles wore at Shea Stadium. They're actually on display when you walk down into the Hard Rock in New York City, and some luggage and stuff that they have. They have some pretty cool stuff there.
Oh wow, that's great.
Yeah, really cool.
The tan jackets that they had.
The tan jackets, right? It's all on display there. All 4 of their costume, the suits are on display, which is pretty wild. And of course, Cousin Brucey was one of the hosts of that show, which is awesome.
Yes, I interviewed Cousin Brucey extensively for it, and I found people from all aspects of the show, people that were in the opening acts, who then went on tour with them, and John Sebastian told me crazy stories of smoking hash with George Harrison and Brian Jones, and just I got great stories. The Beatles were not the innocent young lads they were promoted as.
Wow.
Hey, they were just kids in their 20s,
John Wagner wants to know if you want your own radio show.
Can he get one for me?
There you go, right here on Hamilton Radio.
You can have one right here. We'll be good. We'll give you a Roku. We'll give you a Roku channel too, if you want.
Hey, wow. Well, let's talk. That would be fun.
And then we'll have one for Lassie too, for Timmy, and he can.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we have to have. Yeah, of course, we have to have John on the show. Of course, that'll be awesome.
Yeah,
Oh, he would love it.
Oh, awesome. Let me ask you: out of all the paranormal places and all the haunted places that you've talked about, which would you say is the most haunted place, or the most place with the most activity of paranormal?
I'm thinking. The store was so haunted, the Comedy Store. That off the top of my head, I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would say the Comedy Store, probably the Hollywood Roosevelt is definitely up there. Also, I wanted to ask you about, I know you were very good friends with the legend Johnny Crawford, who just passed away. What are some of your memories of Johnny?
Johnny was awesome. Such a sweet guy. And he had in the late 80s and early 90s, well, throughout the 90s, he had a 1929 jazz orchestra. Did you know that?
No, I did not. Wow.
Oh my God. He was amazing. And that's right up my alley. You know, he had the same range as Bing Crosby. He had a recording career when he starred on The Rifleman. And he had a beautiful voice. And next time you pick up a piece of sheet music, you may see Crawford Publishing at the bottom of it. His father and grandfather were in music publishing, so music was always a part of his life. And he had this fabulous orchestra.
Wow.
Playing the hits of the late 20s and early 30s. And I went to see him wherever he played. And
Nice.
It was my dream that he would play at my wedding. And this was long before I knew John. And
wow.
And so when John and I were getting married, I asked Johnny, could I have a reduced orchestra? And so he picked 6 people that would give him the sound he wanted. And our gift from him was that he sang for free. And,
nice.
You know, he wore a top hat and tails, and he had those old fabulous microphones. And
wow.
He was super. And he had advanced Alzheimer's, which he got at least, gosh, he'd been suffering with it for quite some time. And so his passing was really more of a blessing.
Wow. One of the greatest television shows still on. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I just love the relationship with his father.
Yeah.
And that's what makes all of those shows from that era still stand today. Because
did he ever talk about Chuck Connors to you?
Oh yeah, they were very close. He was
were they? Yeah.
Very. Wow. Yeah, that's the way it was back then. You know,
they had such a nice chemistry on screen, both of them. Of course, people who don't know what I'm talking about, it's the Rifleman and Chuck Connors and Johnny Crawford was Mark, his son, on the show, and it's still on every day. You can catch it on a lot of television stations here in syndication. So great show.
And you know, similar to John on Lassie, there weren't any other kids on that show, so you know, your friends were adults. The guys on the crew.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
Yeah. You know, John couldn't believe when he started regular school that people didn't have 35-year-old friends. Am I the only one? Yeah. So, you know, you mature more. You're more mature than kids your age, and you relate to adults, and you're with them all day, day in, day out. You know, Johnny was on every show. So
sure.
Wow. A tight bond.
Well, there's so much I can talk to you about. I can talk to you all night. Doc, any party shots for Laurie?
Laurie, I'm so amazed by your career and your husband's career that you
amazing.
like Jimmy said, we can go on all day and ask questions. But
crazy.
I just wanted to ask you one thing. If when you were performing either comedy or whatever you were doing, is there any one thing that you can take from that you can tell people that are coming out in entertainment, either performing as an author or an entertainer?
Yeah, the one big rule for me was the people who said, I'm going to give this 3 years, 5 years, and if it doesn't work, I'm going home. I can already tell you those people are going home. You know, you have to go there and stay there and give it your all. You know, yeah, it's nice to have a backup, but you have to plan to stay. So
I love that.
so next time, let's talk about the Mary Tyler Moore Show. I wrote and produced the 20th anniversary of the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
I did not know.
Yes, there you go. I did know that, actually. I mean, we're running out of time, but yeah, if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great, right, Doc?
Yeah, absolutely. Mary Tyler Moore was an awesome show, and Ted Knight. Actually, Ted Knight that was on that show is friends with my friend Lydia Cornell, who is one of the daughters on Close to Comfort.
Sure.
So like we're all friends. It's awesome. I love it.
It's 6. Does anybody here know Kevin Bacon?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Yeah, exactly.
All right,
That's
well,
awesome.
we'll talk about that next time. And
Thank you, Laurie.
I had a blast with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you,
I haven't
Laurie.
been
We did
chatty
too. We
for a
did
long
too.
time.
You're
It
an
was great
awesome
to see you
person, and
again.
we will definitely have you back.
Absolutely. It's great to see you again. Say hello to your husband for me, and we will talk soon. Thank you so much, Laurie. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Laurie.
Jimmy. Thanks, Doc G.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Thank you, Laurie.
Oh, what another great show, Jimmy.
Thank
It's
you.
one of them things you just keep talking and talking and talking. You know?
I really enjoyed that show, man. I really enjoyed talking about her because that's all stuff I'm into, and she has so many great experiences and books, and man, I just love talking to her. I could talk to her all night. Actually, it was great. So coming up,
there's some people like that. There's some people like that, you know. And,
I know she's one of them. She's definitely one of them.
Definitely one of them. But you and I got to get out of here. I got to get something to eat. And
Okay. And we'll see you
who's
next
the guest
Monday.
coming up? Who's the guest coming up, Jimmy?
Let me tell you, next Monday. Yeah, just let me go through the guests real quick. Next Monday, we got Claudia Wells. She's from Back to the Future. She was Michael J. Fox's girlfriend, and she was in 2 of the movies Back to the Future. John Davison's on the way, and then we got David Newell, who's Mr. McFeely from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Speedy Delivery. He's going to be here. The Fab Four, and we got so many more on the way. You know, it's just too much for me to get into right now, but we'll talk about that more next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to thank everybody for listening. I really do appreciate it. And once again, come back next Monday, and we're going to have some more fun.
Absolutely. If you can give me her contact, well, I got her phone, I got her email, so I'm good.
Yeah, okay.
You send it to me.
I'll send it to you. Don't worry.
No, you already did. I got it.
Oh, you did. Okay, good. There you go.
Okay.
She's great.
Jimmy. I'll talk to you later, buddy.
Fabulous. Okay, take care. Good night, Doc.
She was awesome. Have a great night, buddy. Thank you.
Good night,
Thank you,
everybody
for listening. Bye-bye.
I appreciate it. Good night.
Bye-bye.